Hey everybody, this is Alex from Untitled.com, and in these next couple videos, they're just there to help you understand how Express is working under the hood, so you can kind of appreciate the behavior of Express. So in this video, what I want to do is just start an Express project and kind of show you just sort of how things happen and in what order. Okay, so we're going to just kind of create middleware from scratch and just kind of see why Express behaves the way it does. So I'm going to go to my project 1 folder, not project 1, project 2. Start from scratch. I'm going to open this folder in terminal. And in here, we'll give it a second to start up. I'm going to touch my server.js. I'm going to start my npm project, npm init-y. Okay, that take a second. There it goes, and then we can install Express. npm install Express, and that's all I need for now. Because we're going to basically build everything from scratch. This is purely just to kind of see what the behavior of the server is. What order do things happen in? So we can start putting in our basic boilerplate code. So essentially, first here, const express equals require express. So essentially what's happening on this line is that we're bringing in the express library. So essentially the express library is being saved into this variable, which is really just mainly an object with a few functions in it. And what you want to do is create a application. Okay, so essentially what you do is that everything works based off at the highest level of an application object. The application object allows you to start your listener, so you can listen for requests, and allows you to do a bunch of other stuff. So we have to create that application object. So this is going to be our application, and it's the result of the express function, which is this. Okay, create our application object. Okay, and then from that application object, we can create a listener that listens for requests. So we're going to say, hey, we want to listen on port 3000, and once that begins listening, we can pass in a callback that will run the minute that it starts listening. So we can just sit there and say console.log, I am listening. Okay, so it's most basic. That's what Express does. It creates a server that listens for requests on a port on your computer. So now if I were to just run this, nodamon server.js, and again, nodamon is I have installed globally, which just allows you to run the server, but it watches for file changes, so that way it restarts the server every time I change the files. So we'll let that start. Okay, so we know it's working because it says I am listening. But right now it really doesn't do much. It's listening, but it doesn't, you know. Okay, so if I go to localhost, just to kind of, because again, when we say listening on port 3000, it's going to listen to on our computer at localhost 3000, or technically it's also 127.0.0.0 3000. Localhost 3000. And see, it says cannot get. Okay, because what happens is that this request is going into our server, and then our server is trying to look for some way to send a response. But right now, we have no way to send a response. Okay, so essentially what's going to happen is, let's pretend that when the request comes in, it's going to start here and keep looking till it gets to the end of the file, looking for where to make a response. And if it can't find anything that triggers any kind of response, I'm going to get this, cannot get. That just means it couldn't find something to satisfy this request. Okay, so the server's working, I just don't have anything that satisfies any requests. And it just starts from the top and goes through a series of functions referred to as middleware. Okay. Essentially everything going forward is essentially middleware. It's running between the moment that your request arrives at the server to the moment that a response is generated. Now, you can have global middleware, and global middleware usually would be based on the application, and you use a function called app.use. Now, if I use app.use and I just put a function in it, it's going to run no matter what the request URL or method is. So I could just do this, app.use, and then I could just put a function in here, but I'm going to actually create a function so you can see what the shape of a middleware function is. Basically, that middleware function will always be passed the request, so all the details about the request, the response object, which gives you the tools to make a response, and it also gets passed a next function, which, if this middleware does a thing but doesn't give you a response, then it should go on to the next piece of middleware. So when it hits the next function, it just moves on to the next piece of middleware that it finds. Okay. So if I do this, okay, console.log, I am middleware. Okay, if I do that, and then write the next function, this will then move on to the next piece of middleware, app.use again. Then I'll just do another one, rec res next. Oh, that's a curly brackets. Rec res next. And it'll say this one does console log. I will send a response. And then this one will send a very basic response. So response.send hello world. Save. And since none of this is really route specific, literally anything I can type in will result in just getting that response. So if I hit localhost 3000, see, I get hello world. If I type in hello world local 3000, if I type in localhost 3000/cheese, I'll still get hello world. The reason being is that technically the way I wrote this will hit every route. This will satisfy. This will send this middleware will run for every route. That's not super fun. Okay. What makes this more interesting is when you start creating middleware that only runs for particular routes. Okay, for particular URLs. So that way you can control what happens depending on where they type in they want to go to. So I'm going to get rid of this piece of middleware. Although, I'll show you one thing. In app.use, what you can do is if you only want that piece of middleware to run when the URL begins with a certain thing, you can just put a first argument, which is a route. So I can sit there and say, I only want this to run when they go to /cheese. Okay, comma. So this particular middleware will only run if they go to the URL cheese, and if so, then this particular function will then run. Okay, so we restart here. So now if I go to cheese, well, actually first let's go to the root. So this is not cheese, so that second piece of middleware should not run. So you see this cannot get. See, it's still, that first piece of middleware still ran, because we still get that console log, I am middleware. But I still get this cannot get, because technically none of the middleware that it did hit send any kind of response. But if I type in middleware slash cheese, hello world. Cool. Okay, so we're getting somewhere fancier. The thing about this is, it doesn't matter if it's a kind of what kind of method. It doesn't. So if it's a get request, a put request, a delete request, it's going to handle it the same way. Okay. There's another way you can end up with sort of the same thing, is if you use like app.all. That also would just basically satisfy. And I did this. Dog. Okay. Rec. Dot. No. Then it's just another middleware function. Rec. Comma res. Next. Okay, you can always put in the next function. You don't. If it's a function you never plan on passing on to the next, then you don't necessarily need to write next. But just to illustrate the point that it's always there if you want to use it. Rec res next, and then here I can just sit there and say console res.send. This is the dog endpoint. Okay, an endpoint always just refers to sort of what's the end of the URL. Okay, so now really I have two endpoints that result in a response: cheese and dog. Now both of these would hit all routes, because again this takes any kind of request. That's what all means. And use is just always used, because it's part of the app object. So long as the application's running, it'll run through each of these apps. But again, whenever there's a URL string, it's going to check that first. Okay, so let's see here. Now if I just type in here dog, that'll work. But more fun is that it'll also run. So let's see here. Let me go. Let's clear this terminal. If I were to make a curl request, so curl, let's make something that's other than a get request. Let's make a delete request. And we're making it to localhost 3000/dog. Oh, forgot the colon. See, I get the response. This is the dog endpoint. Why? Because I wrote app.all. I'm still going to get that no matter what. And the same thing if I wrote cheese, because that use middleware will always run if it's a cheese endpoint. So see, hello world. Okay, I'm going to get that response no matter what if I were just to send random requests with any verb. Delete, post, put. So, cool. Now what if I want middleware that only runs for a collection of routes? But I'm going to have, well, actually first, let's say I have global middleware, but I only want it to run when a certain type of verb is used. So like a get or a put. That's when you start doing routes like this, app.get. App.get is still middleware, but it's saying, hey, if the URL ends with /bob, okay, then, but has to be a get request to Bob, then start running all this middleware. And the cool thing is you can have multiple pieces of middleware. So I could say rec res next equals console log Bob, and then after that function I can pass in another piece of middleware. So you can just do this as many times as you want. Rec res next, and then I can actually send back. Yay! 2 middlewares ran. Okay, so all it is it's literally just a string of middleware, and it's just, and every time it first runs this function, and when it hits next, it just moves on to the next function. And then we can specify whether this function should be run based on the endpoint. Okay, so then if it only matches this endpoint, does it run that piece of middleware? And we can also specify the method, and then it'll check for both. It'll check to see if the endpoint matches and if the method matches. Okay, so, you know, and then when you hit a particular piece of middleware, you can pass in as many functions into that middleware as you want. Again, long as they use this next function. So actually, let me forget I forgot to write next here. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Cool. So this one will basically console log Bob, hit next, which then takes it to this function over here. But only if we start off with Bob, because it's all part of the same app.get. So, but it only works if I make a get request to Bob. So if I go over here and type in Bob, what did I do wrong there? App.get, let's see here. Not in this context. Oh, I wrote res twice. Thank you, errors, for being descriptive. Rec res save. Okay. Refresh. There you go. See, yay, 2 middlewares ran. But if I try to make a delete request to Bob, this will not run because that route specifies get. So I get an error. Cannot delete Bob. So again, basically all you're doing is you're just designing rules for which middleware gets run on which requests. Okay, so cool. That's that. But what if I wanted to create, like, so that right now if I use app.use, it's global unless I specify an endpoint. But what if I want to create a bunch of verb specific routes that get middleware for just that clump of routes? That's where the router function comes in. Okay, so we'll say const cat router. Okay, cat router equals express dot router. Okay, this creates a router object. So if let's say I want that, and again, everything always runs in order. So let's say I want, if I use an endpoint of cat, then none of this middleware runs, and that instead it's going to go to other middleware that's specific to the cat endpoint. What I would do is I put this here at the top. So what I'll do is I'll do app.use, I'll go /cat as my endpoint. And then I'm going to say, hey, whenever someone goes to a cat endpoint, run the cat router. The cat router is essentially going to be a function we're going to attach a bunch of routes to. Cat router. So now what I'm going to do is go down here, and we'll just kind of segment off those specific routes. So we'll say cat router dot get. Well, let's say I want something to happen every time you hit a cat route. So we cat router dot use. It's kind of like it was app dot use. So this is like it's not global middleware. It won't run for every route, but it'll run for every route that goes to the cat router. So app dot use rec res next, and then we'll just say console.log meow. Okay, cool. So every time you type in any kind of cat, we'll get a console log of meow. But specifically, if you do a cat router, if you do a get to mouse, okay, then we'll say rec res next console.log console.log. We're playing a game, you know, like if we're playing a game of cat and mouse. We are playing a game. Cool. So this, so anytime the cat router is invoked, because again, this is going to check, is it /cat? If it is, then it runs this cat router function. It would then skip all these routes You can go down here. Then it'll run this. This middleware, catrouter.use. And actually, this one I want to send. This will be a response, res.send. And then, if it's a GET request to mouse, and actually I should put /mouse, then they'll run that one. So let's try all that out. But if it's not mouse, so let's say I just do /cat, it'll still run this one, but since this one doesn't get hit and no response is sent, then it goes back up here and continues down the list of routes. Okay? So let's see here. So if I go through /, so if I want to do a catch-all, so if I want to do something that's going to catch everything just in case, I might want to interject a app.use, and then we're just going to say this one is just going to do rec res. I'm not even bother putting next because this will just end everything. This is going to be the response you get if nothing else works. So res.send default response. So essentially, if nothing else kind of really worked, this is going to be your default response. Okay, so save, because basically again it'll work its way through. So let's first start off with cat mouse. Oh, I think it's still starting up the server. Okay, that means we have an error. So let's take a look. Duplicate parameter. Oh, I did res again. All right. Line 23. Res. Oh no. I'm not allowed. Where? Line 30. Res. I did it again. Save. Okay. Let's just make sure the server's starting up again. Express.router is not a function. Oh, because it's uppercase router. I always do that. So express.router. There we go. Save. Boop, 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 boop. It's still figuring things out. So we got the meow, so it hit this middleware. Oh, but I never gave it a next function, so it just got stuck there. So you see, it just hung up. It never. See, it's never sending me a response because it just times out. Okay, so let's try that again. And see, we are playing a game because that request came in, starts at the top. The very first middleware matches the cat part, so it gets sent to cat router. So then it goes takes a look at all the cat router middleware. Catrouter.use. So we got meow, and then it went here. We are the next part did match mouse, so it says we are playing a game, and that was a response. So the server was done. And see, none of this other middleware ran. Okay, we didn't get, I am middleware. We didn't get any of these other things. Okay, so now let's try what happens if I just do cat. I get the default response because what happened? Okay, it started at the top. It hit cat, so it went down to the cat router. So it went down here. It gave me the meow, so we see the meow down here, but it doesn't have mouse, so it skipped that one. But that means it was done with the cat router, so it goes back up to the list, starts with the next one. The next one says I am middleware, so we get I am middleware. It doesn't have cheese, so it's not that, not dog, not Bob. And then it finally makes it here to the default response. That's a response, so it stops there. The minute it hits a response, it stops. Okay, so that's all it is. That's all that's going on under the hood of Express. Every middleware function, everything you use is just a function. It's just a function. that gets passed in the request and the response object. And if it doesn't generate a response on its own, it then passes it on to the next piece of middleware until a response happens. And if no response happens, that's when you get the cannot get, the cannot put, the cannot screen. So that's essentially all that's going on in Express under the hood. With that, my name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Have a great day and enjoy.